I'm Nikki Lowe and welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show, where I share insights and interviews that support women to combine their family, work and life in a more successful and sustainable way. Today we're talking about personal brand. Everybody has a personal brand. Whoever you are, whatever you do, you make an impact on those around you, whether you know it or not. Think about your colleagues or your friends. Who's the most reliable? Who always finds a way to get it done? Who isn't very responsive? Who can't handle being wrong? That, my lovely listeners, is the idea behind personal brand. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, famously once said, "Your personal brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room." Do you know what people say about you when you're not in the room? Today's episode, I'm going to be exploring how you can consciously focus on your personal brand. But for many of us, creating a personal brand can feel a daunting and almost mythical task, like searching for unicorn dust. That's why I'm so excited to be joined by personal brand expert Deborah Ogden. Deborah helps individuals be visible, building profile, impact and presence with a standout personal brand. We're going to be diving into making sure you get noticed, heard and remembered for the right reasons. Because the research shows that when we build a positive personal brand, it has so many benefits personally and professionally. Deborah also understands the impact of our personal brand when we become a mother and how to navigate that as a working mum. Deborah is a Lancashire lass at heart, living in her adopted county of Yorkshire with her sports journalist husband and her son Oscar. And as Sharma Haider from Forbes said, the question is no longer if you have a personal brand, but if you choose to guide and cultivate the brand or to let it be defined on your behalf. Let's not leave this to chance, ladies. Let's take control of our personal brand to have the impact that we want in this world. Let's dive into this topic and welcome Deborah. So welcome, Deborah. I'm so pleased that you're joining me today on the show.
Oh, it's wonderful to be with you, Nikki. Thank you so much for inviting me along.
So I always love to start my conversations with my guests about their journey. So I'd love to know, how did you come to be a personal brand expert?
Well, where do we start? It's interesting, isn't it? When I'm working with clients, I always say your personal brand, you know, the big Mary Poppins medicine bag that she has. I always say your personal brand is all those experiences, all those job roles, all that life experience that you've had in the bag, and then you bring it all out and it's beautifully curated, and that's your personal brand. So mine started way back, and I studied law, went to an all-girls school, and the expectation was that you did something like law or medicine and you did a proper degree. And so off I did and did law, and really my heart was never in it. And I think I fell into those studies, which were really tough. And I came out the other side, and I can remember going traveling, doing the round the world traveling that so many people do when they're at university, and having a long distance call with my mum and dad, and them saying, "Deborah, are you going to go to law school or not? You're going to have to make a decision." And once again, it was, "Oh, okay, but I'm not sure it's what I want to do." So fast forward a few years, I qualified, and I ended up working for management consultants in their employment law department. And while I was there, they did a lot of marketing and comms, and I just happened to pick up Marketing Week one day in the office, and I brought it home, and I don't think I put it down. I read it cover to cover, and I just thought, wow, this is a whole new world for me. So discovered a love of marketing, and within the organisation started working with the marketing team. And then I saw an advert for a role at Lancashire County Cricket Club. Now, I've been brought up with a sports mad dad and brother, and I'd always played cricket on the beach and loved football, always gone to football, watched Manchester United. And I saw this role and I thought, gosh, this is my dream role. and I applied and got it within the sales and marketing team. And I don't think I ever really looked back from there. I think that was the true grounding of the role that I have now, because I ended up as I was there for over 10 years, and I became the first media manager in sport. So they didn't have professional media managers in those days. So the first media manager in cricket. And my role then was very much about identifying these sports people and linking them with a sponsor and getting them ready to be there for their media interviews, to speak on different topics. And so the skills that I used then are very similar to the skills that I use now with my clients. And I loved it there, but it was in the years when cricket was still very male dominated, and it just became a little bit challenging. I just felt that I wasn't given the opportunities that I perhaps could have had, and I moved on. And then, just to fast forward a little bit, I found myself as a mum and a much wanted little boy in the world, Oscar. And it was a really long journey to have Oscar. And through that, I became quite poorly at times. So we sort of reassessed our priorities. And I'm sure many of your listeners will recognize, as mums, your sort of life is turned upside down. And even though he was the most wanted little boy in the world, I really struggled with my identity. And I can remember one particular pivotal moment, sat on a cold church hall floor singing Dingly Dangly Scarecrow for the third time, and me thinking, what has happened to Deborah? Overnight, I've become Oscar's mummy. I'm talking about the benefits of disposable nappies against reusable ones, and what I've just lost myself. And with the help of a little bit of counselling, and I don't know about you, Nikki, but I'm one of those people that if I have a problem, give me the solution and give me some tools, and I'll go out and try and fix it. And yeah, I had some counselling. I had a brilliant counsellor, and I just had 5 sessions, and I came out of there thinking, I know exactly what I want to do. I've always wanted my own business, but I have these marketing, communication skills, these media skills. And I recognised that it was all around identity, and whether it's becoming a mum, whether it's maybe recovering from illness, maybe coming through a divorce, a relationship, it might just be hitting a big birthday, then we all come across these milestones where we do question our identity. And for me, that was the moment. So that was 10 years ago. And nobody really called it personal branding then, but we talked about profile and impact and reputation. And the business has developed from there. And this last 10 years, really interesting. Sorry, this last 10 months, I think I've been contacted more around personal brand and visibility than I have in the last 10 years. So all of a sudden, yeah, isn't it interesting how whether it's working from home and people have realized how much they need to be visible and how they need to stay visible. But also, I think we have had time to reflect over the last few months, haven't we? And maybe one of the challenges that I always have with clients is I always say it's not about the beautifully curated Instagram feed. That's the outer work. What about the inner work? And I think without coaches, sometimes a number of people have maybe had more time or have been the situation has forced them to reflect a little bit more on that inner work, and maybe that is a reason. I don't know, but it is certainly more at the forefront of people's minds.
Gosh, I love that. It's such a powerful story, and I can see how, was it Steve Jobs that said you can't join the dots looking forward, but you can looking backwards, and you can absolutely, as you talk about your story, see how all those dots kind of come together.
Yeah, Yeah,
And particularly
definitely.
the piece about sitting on that cold church hall floor. And I know I can relate to that, and I'm sure so many women can, of either being on maternity leave or perhaps taking a career break and having that experience of, gosh, my personal and professional identities have collided here, and I'm losing sense of them, or I'm trying to reintegrate them. So today we're going to be
Yeah.
talking about that personal branding, and it's probably a topic we've heard before, and we've also heard you start to give an insight into it. Can you explain what personal brand means to you and your clients?
Personal branding, I think, can get a bad rap. So let's get the elephant out of the room first of all, but tackle the elephant in the room. But personal branding, I think, can be perceived as the fake it till you make it, and that isn't my take on it. The best quote around personal branding comes from Jeff Bezos, and that is, "Your personal brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room." And for me, that sums it up. It's about it's the same in any marketing. If you have a physical brand or a brand that is a business brand, it's about people's experience around you. So it's, what do people get when they interact with you? It's, what's your reputation? It's, what's your profile, your impact? How authentic are you? Are you able to? And I think the challenge really comes when, or I find the challenge with my clients is having that true clarity on what their brand is. So they know that they've got to get themselves out there, and they feel that they should be more visible, but they're trying to be everything to everybody, and they haven't got that true clarity. So for me, it's not just having clarity of message, but it's having clarity on your goals as well, because unless you know where you're going, you can't adapt that message for your full benefit. So it's about having that real clarity on who you are and being able to articulate that. So being able to say to people, these are my values, or no, because you've crossed a boundary here. So that's where the personal branding impacts it sort of side by side, in that it's not just about visibility, it's about confidence, it's about self-worth, it's about stepping up, it's about knowing who you are. And therefore, I don't know about you, but my mum always said to me, sometimes, Deborah, a strong no is as powerful as a yes. And I've always taken that with me, and knowing when to say no. And I think having clarity in your personal brand and knowing what you stand for can really help you in those tricky conversations.
I love that, because, yeah, often people think of it in the marketing sense, but what I'm hearing is it just impacts as we show up every day. And I know a lot of the women that I work with can fall into the trap of people pleasing, and it's almost like, actually, you cannot please everybody, and if you do, you dilute your personal brand anyway. But what I'm hearing you say is that strong sense of who you are and your boundaries, that kind of impacts it in an everyday life.
Absolutely. And this is a challenge that I have quite often with clients, and they'll say, well, oh, if I'm so focused and I'm so clear with my brand, then I might put those people over in that camp off. And I said, that's absolutely fine. We want to find our tribe. Um, the best personal brands in the world are divisive. One of the most powerful personal brands in the world is Donald Trump. But not many people, for those that buy into him, they will support him through whatever he does, whatever the rest of us think of it. So for a strong personal brand, you will you will appeal to many, but a lot of people will say, no, thank you, that's not for me. But you don't want to be bland. People need to know what they're buying into. And if they buy into your values, if they buy into your way of working, if they buy into your culture, if you like, then they will probably become your clients and your customers, but they'll also become your advocates. And many of your listeners, I'm sure, will be business owners and maybe sole traders or running their own small business. And you and I are the same. We need our sales force out there, don't we? We need our cheerleaders out there recommending and referring our business. So it's very much knowing what it is you stand for and then talking to those people, and those that don't fit, let them go. I always say you're much better being Marmite than vanilla.
I love it. Yes. So obviously here on this podcast, we're talking about working mums. And as you say, they might be running their own business or they might be working for an organisation.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the key challenges for working mums in particular about getting clear on their personal brand?
Well, I suppose we've touched on one of them already. Initially, it's that identity shift. So we've all, and it's a mindset shift, isn't it? Becoming a mum is a mindset shift, but it's also a huge lifestyle shift. So there's all the practical sides of being mummy all of a sudden, and juggling work and home life and work-life balance. And my goodness, when you look at the last 12 months of juggling homeschooling as well and all the other challenges that are in there. So there is so much going on, but I think so much of it is that mindset piece as well, and accepting that things have changed and it's a new part of your journey. And for me, where it really helped was looking at what my values were and looking what I stood for, and even really simple things like how I dressed. So fashion and clothing to me is one of life's pleasures. So I always had beautiful clothes for work. So I'd have all my suits, and I would open my wardrobe doors in a morning and think, well, when am I going to be wearing those again? While I was on maternity leave. And it's about adapting and recognizing that new identity, and giving yourself permission to adapt and change and embrace the new person. And it's no lesser. Quite often we think, oh, well, I wish it was, those old days, but it's just different. And it's looking for the positives in that moment. And also, I think there are challenges around maybe part-time working, or when children are poorly, or all the other added challenges that we have as a working mum. But also, I do believe that we learn so much as parents. So multitasking, empathy, resilience, all those new skills that are certainly learned or heightened as we become parents. Somebody said yesterday, I have 4 children, and I said, oh, that must be challenging. She said, yes, I'm very good at crowd control. And I I love that. But even project management, budget management, how many things as mums do we take for granted? But just because we do it on a day-to-day basis, we don't recognize those as true skills. And that is part of your personal brand. It's every single bit. It's very holistic. And it's looking at what do you bring to the table, and hopefully your personal brand, and working on your personal brand and having that clarity of what your strengths are, and just taking that time to reflect and recognizing that you will have strengths. So you will have a superpower that you are brilliant at, that you just take for granted because you're good at it. And actually, other people don't find that so easy. And we all have these. It's just working at finding out what these are. And therefore, it's taking that time to reflect, talk to people. We've got the download, haven't we, that goes with the podcast, that might be really useful for listeners, that is how to uncover your superpower. And there's some little quizzes in there and some little tools and techniques just to work you through and give you that clarity on who am I, and what is it what are my values, what are my strengths, what do I bring to the table. And once you have that clarity, then you can start to communicate that consistently.
Fantastic. And thank you for putting that together. And I think that will help so many people that might be going, this sounds great. I want to learn more about my personal brand. So where do I start? So for anybody that's interested in that, if you head over to www.wisdom4, F-O-R, workingmums.co.uk/57, the number 5, the number 7, you can get it there. So wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk/57. So clearly, we've talked about some of the challenges for working mums, and I can absolutely hear in there's the piece around the shift and the transition that people go through, both practically and from a mindset perspective. And I'm hearing you say that there's owning kind of the new skills and strengths, or they might not be new, but they've just risen to the surface a bit more during that time. That instead of kind of going, actually, I may have had to, I'm now working 4 days a week. So there's sometimes we can have this kind of limiting belief that people would think I'm not as committed, or I'm, not perceived. And some of that might be real, and some of it might be perceived. What I'm hearing you say is now actually own the superpowers that brings, of actually I'm even more resilient and I'm even more committed, and kind of bringing that into your personal brand.
Yes, and something that you've said there, which I was very guilty of, is owning that you're a mum. Being a mum is part of our personal brand. Family is part of our personal brand. And for me, when I set up the business, and I'm ashamed to say this, but there were times when I would say, certainly when Oscar started school, oh, I'm really sorry, I can't have a meeting till 10 o'clock. Yes, I've got a meeting earlier that morning, and I can't have meetings after 3 o'clock because, and at no point in that period did I say, because I'll be doing the school run, because I choose to do the school run. And it took me a long time to realize that I was doing myself an injustice, but I wasn't empowering other women as well. And I do believe that it's up to us to open up that conversation and have that pride in what we're doing. My definition of success is to have that flexibility, to have that choice, to be there for Oscar. And as long as he wants me, I'm afraid he's too old for me to be at the school gates anymore. He'd be horrified at the age of 13 to see me there. But it is that choice and embracing that. So I do a lot of public speaking, and it's rare that I would give a presentation when Oscar isn't mentioned in some way through one of the stories or through one of the examples that I give. I've embraced my role as a mum because I believe that it's a huge part of who I am. And why hide that? But also part of my personal brand is about empowering other women. And by doing that, I'm empowering other mums.
Brilliant. And I was going to ask you about the benefits of having a clear personal brand. And I feel like you've touched on so many of those already, which is around kind of the visibility and kind of empowering yourself and connecting to your strengths. But what might be some of the other benefits of having a clear personal brand?
The whole point about business, but your personal brand is relevant, as we've touched on, across the board. So it's with your friends, it's when you are influencing people. So a strong personal brand helps you influence, because all the research shows that when people are unsure, if they don't have clarity, then that will bring confusion, and that brings a disconnect. So what we want to do is we want people to trust us. It's the know, like, trust that we hear about so often. But people need to know what they're buying into, and they need to know that they're going to get that consistently. So I always say your personal brand is probably one of the simplest things that you will ever work on. I do a lot of work maybe in law firms with accountants or large corporates where you've got some academically really bright people that have been through some challenging exams to get to where they are. And I would say this will be the simplest thing, but it won't be the easiest, because you need that reflection, but you need consistency. And like any brand, we need to show up consistently, and people get that same experience. So that's really important, because if there is if you're not consistent, then that trust will start to break down. But what we're looking for in that trust is two things. It's about warmth and competence. And Amy Cuddy's done some fabulous work around this. And she talks about for us to have trust, the credibility is, of course, important, but first of all, you need warmth. People need to engage with you. So part of your personal brand should be your smile, how you greet people. So that's an incredibly important part of personal branding. But also on a much more practical level, there's some fabulous research from Harvey Coleman, which is often quoted, how actually only 10% of our career success is down to our technical ability. The other 90% is down to our soft skills. And in these, and this is quite an old study, but is still referred to on a regular basis. But even more recently, I think it was Deloitte's have done a survey that said in 2030, a huge proportion, and I think it was something like 75% of jobs will be soft skill based, because that is the area that AI, however developed it is, will not be able to cope with. So being able to connect, being able to articulate your value, but being visible as well. So some people listening may think, but I'm really good at what I do and my work should speak for itself. But unfortunately, if you are the world's best kept secret, you're never going to achieve your full potential. So Harvey Coleman's model will say that 10% is down to your technical ability, 30% is down to your image, as he calls it, which is your personal brand. And then he talks about exposure. A full 60% is down to exposure. Now, that would be your visibility. And that's knowing the direction you want to go in. So if you work within an organization, making sure that the right stakeholders know who you are, but also what you do and what you are about, so that they know if a role comes up within the organization that you are a sure fit for it, or a fabulous project comes up. And likewise, if you're running your own business, your clients know exactly where to find you, but not just what you do, but what will it be like in your world. So there'll be many people that are personal brand consultants out there. They will get a different experience working with me than they will do with the next person. And it's finding the person that has the right fit for you. And it's the same if you're a coach, a graphic designer, an accountant, the same principles apply.
Brilliant. Completely get that. And what I'm also hearing in that is about taking control and empowering yourself with that brand. And I'm thinking of a particular client that I've been working with recently, and we did an informal 360 with her stakeholders, and it came back that she was really nice and they loved working with her and she was lovely. And she was like, actually, that's not what I want my narrative to be. It's lovely that they think I'm lovely, but actually, where is it about what I'm delivering and how I'm respected? And it's almost like taking control of that narrative. And also, I'm imagining, we might think that we are having one impact and actually we're having another. And I remember hearing you speak about somebody who might just say, I'm shy and that's just how I am. But people might interpret that as being actually you're aloof or you're cold or you're unlikable or something that's not so helpful.
Absolutely. And there is this, I always say there are two personal brands. There's the one that's going on in your head. So that's the one, how we think we come across. But the other challenging part of personal branding is that it's all about perception. So it doesn't actually matter what you think you come across, it's how people are receiving you. So it's like any form of communication. So it's actually how people experience your personal brand. So perfect example is the one you've brought up there, that people will think I'm shy, I'm more introverted. I think you'll have heard me tell the story about a client who I said, this week, I want you to, when you go and order your Starbucks in the morning, I want you to strike up conversation with the barista. And he said, I can't do that because he might talk back to me. Now, somebody who is more extrovert would think, I can't even imagine that. But those that are more introverted, that find small talk very difficult, will absolutely relate with that to that story. And it's about building those relationships so that you don't come across as aloof. If you're more introverted, sometimes it's very easy to seek solace, but just by having those opportunities, finding those opportunities to build relationships, it doesn't have to be all the time. You don't have to be life and soul of the party, but just make those connections.
So we've kind of talked about what a personal brand is and why it's important and why it can be challenging for working mums in particular. I'd love to move on to now about what are your top tips for actually getting clear on your personal brand?
So this really is the inner work. So this is finding out what you stand for. So the inner work, it's interesting. Quite often when people come and work with me, I think they're always quite surprised how deep we can go. But you, so many people listening to this will I'm sure relate to a story I heard from a client of mine, and she said, my biggest fear, Deborah, is that one day I'll wake up and realize my ladder's up against the wrong wall. And I think we can, a little bit like I said, the expectation was that I went off and did a law degree, and we can get into a profession or a role, and children come along, mortgages come along, and all of a sudden we're on a treadmill of what we should be doing. And I think many women these days are getting to sort of 40s, maybe late 30s, 40s, 50s, and having that moment of, I'm not sure this is what I want. I may want a change in career. I may have experienced ill health. And I think the pandemic has certainly made a lot of people reassess. So it's about having that clarity of what do I truly want from my life. And something I often say to young women particularly, but young people, is that we are responsible. We are responsible for our careers. We are responsible for our lives. There's nobody going to come out and help us and be looking after our careers for us. So it's about taking that time, which sometimes is a little bit painful, but taking that time to reflect and think, okay, what is it that I truly want? And it's virtually that you reverse engineer it and say, well, okay, if I want to be partner of this solicitor's firm, then what do I need to learn? Who do I need to engage with? Where do I need to be visible to build my profile in that area? If I want my own business, in what is the end game? What am I aiming for? So you have that clarity, and then knowing what the end game is, you can start to plan who you need to be connecting with, who you need in your network, who your stakeholders are, who your audience are, and then look at your message and start to communicate that with absolute clarity so that there isn't that confusion.
I love that. So there's the inner work piece, which is about getting clarity, understanding what you stand for, what you're about, and then there's the outer work about actually, well, who are my stakeholders then, and what do I want to be communicating, and how do I need to be communicating that?
Yes, and I think one thing, just as you said that back, just a little sort of caveat is that often people will think, well, what do I do? And we're scratching deeper than our CV. It's not just the what you do, it's three areas. It's the what you do, but it's the who you are. So it's your personality, which is your values, your beliefs, your experiences. But then it's the how you do it as well. So it's your behaviors. How do you show up? Are you attention to detail? Are you the person that goes the extra mile? Are you the person that notices that actually you've not heard from your friend for a couple of months, a couple of weeks, and you'll pick up the phone. It's all those little small behaviors that again we take for granted but are very much part of who we are. And you mentioned 360. I work with my clients, my one-to-one clients, and we do 360 feedback, and I always say 95% of it will be fabulous, and you hear how wonderful you are and what a great team player you are or a great leader. But actually the gold dust for me is in the 5%, the 3% of, do you do this when you're under pressure or could do better in this area? Because once we have that awareness, we can do something about it.
Absolutely. So I think that's a beautiful kind of, I wanted to say sandwich, but I'm not sure, kind of like your personal brand sits between the inner and the outer work. And what you've already said is actually getting clear on some of that inner work. You've put together these prompts for people that, as I said, if they head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk/57, they can get an insight into. But what might be some of the things in there that we could just share now that might prompt people's thinking?
So there are some specific questions. So you need to be finding out from people, how do you come across? Because remember, it's not how you think you come across, it's how people receive you. So it's about finding your trusted circle and getting some feedback from people that you trust. I would always say, remember that feedback is feedback, and look for the themes and wonder why somebody has said that, why somebody has given you that guidance. So that's always important. But also look at your values. So there are some exercises around, there are many online little personality tests that you can take that are included in the download that you can click through, and it will give you some ideas on your preferred behaviors. But also there's some work there around values as well, knowing what your top values are, the non-negotiables, which help us then with our boundaries as well.
Brilliant. And I know that that's going to be jam-packed with goodness, but what I'm hearing you say, there's some personality profiles that bring out your personality traits. There's even doing some values questionnaires to bring your values to the surface if you're not consciously aware of those, and going out and getting feedback from kind of your trusted circle that can reflect back the impact that has on them. And so once we're clear on that, what might be a couple of strategies you could share for how you would then go out and do the outer work, the kind of communicating piece?
Well, this is important. This is why. So a lot of people jump in here straight away and they get out on social media, or they'll be out at networking events, or they'll be writing articles in the press or whatever it may be. But it's very important that you know what you want to be known for, because very quickly somebody can be, if you're not managing your personal brand carefully, then you can very quickly be known as something else. So the reason I mention this, I had an experience a couple of years ago now, whereas a wonderful coach that I know who works within the NHS, brilliant coach, and somebody approached her and said, could you help me? I'm looking for somebody to help me step up in my career. I've been overlooked for promotion a couple of times, and Tilla, who is a brilliant coach, said, actually, I could help you, but the person you really want to talk to is Deborah Ogden, because that's her niche. So really being known for a niche helps you have those perfect clients recommended to you, referred to you. So again, that goes to that overall knowing what your goals are. So it's looking and thinking, well, where are my audience? Where are my tribe? Where are my stakeholders hanging out? And then I would be saying, yes, it is looking at social media then. But if you are in corporate world or you are in professional services, then it's obvious to say, but people still do it. I wouldn't necessarily be on TikTok or Snapchat. I'd be saying, well, your profile needs to be out there on LinkedIn. And it's also not just looking at what platform, but remembering to communicate your brand through that. So often I'll work with people who are full of life, that are fabulous storytellers, that are compelling when you're listening to them. And I go onto their LinkedIn profile and I think this can't be the same person, because all the life and all the storytelling has been sucked out of this profile. So just remember to keep communicating those values, communicating that personality in all the different platforms. That's easier on things like Instagram, because it's so much more visible, so much more visual. So, showing your face on there, because people buy people. I know it's a cliche, but people want to see your face. They want to buy into you. I don't know about you, but the first time I ever go on a website, one of the first pages I go to is the About Us page, to have a look at the people and see what they look like, and just decide whether I like them or not. And
I'm
we do that.
assuming with that, Deborah, if there's somebody listening that goes, actually, I don't use a lot of social media in my job, it's more about communicating internally with my kind of colleagues and kind of line managers or senior people. Would that mean that, even in an email, that you are trying to infuse some of your personality and values into that, or making sure that, as we now are, having Zoom or Team or whatever video calls, that you're dressing to your personal brand, but also communicating that personal brand when you're in conversation?
Absolutely. So I always say there are three areas. It's clarity, communicate, and capitalize. So the communication piece is more the reactive. So I think people think communicate and they think email, how we pick up the phone, maybe social media, but actually it's every single touch point. So I often say to clients, just sit down with a piece of paper and think how many times people interact with your brand on a daily basis. So that is how you walk in the room. How's your energy as you walk in the room? Do you smile? Do you make eye contact? How's your handshake? Do you return calls when you say you will? If somebody's struggling, will you go and make them a cup of coffee? Do you remember somebody's birthday? Do you remember where they were at weekend? Do you even bother to ask how their weekend went? And for some people, that's obvious, that's natural. For other people, that takes work. How you dress. We all say we shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but we do. And first impressions are absolutely key. And we should be showing up in a way that represents, it's our visual clues. There are these non-verbal clues that we are communicating, that are giving people a hint at our personal brand before they even get to know us. And it might be, some people will say that your personal brand is yours to lose virtually. You have the reputation, so you show up, and people already know of you, know of your profile. So are you going to live up to that as well? So it really is a holistic take on your communication, every single touch point, which is why it can be exhausting as well.
But I love that. It's the clarity, communicate, capitalize. Well, there's lots of goodness in this, and thank you. And I know that download will also have so many prompts. But if there was just one thing that you hope a working mum takes away from listening to this podcast and what you've been saying, what would you want that to be?
Part of your personal brand is knowing your purpose. And for me, I truly believe my superpower is an ability to see potential in people and bring it out. One of my favourite quotes, which is above my laptop as I'm speaking now, comes from Marianne Williamson, which talks about us being powerful beyond measure. And that's in each and every one of us. It's just that not everybody realizes it. So my hope for every woman is that we stop playing small, that we take these small steps. And what I love about this is it's available to everybody. I didn't say this at the beginning, but I was never the funniest. I was never the cleverest. I was never the prettiest or the fastest. I was often the one that was last picked in PE. But I realised very early on that there are certain things that we can do that get us noticed. And quite often that's just by being a kind, good person and doing the right thing. My definition of integrity is to do the right thing when nobody's watching. So I do think that it's about stop playing small. Let's, own our power. And I mean power in a soft way, really. I don't mean it in an aggressive way. I mean, let's show up as who we are and who we want to be. So my website is deborahogden.com. So that's easy enough. I have a podcast as well, which is On Brand With, which is available on all the usual podcast platforms. And that's very much about bringing personal branding to life. So through people's stories, chatting to people and their experiences of their own personal brand in the real world. And then the last 12 months have meant that I have had to adapt very quickly to a digital model. And one of the things that I developed during lockdown was my Impact Club, which is a monthly membership, which is a platform which has lots of videos and training, but also we've created a wonderful community to really support each other and help people stop playing small, remind people to be visible. So, and I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter. So all the social media platforms as well.
And I'll put the links to that in the show notes, which you'll also find at wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk/57. Thank you, Deborah. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise and experience with us. I think there's some real nuggets in there for us to reflect on for our personal brands. So thank you.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation, Nikki. It's lovely to be on the other side of the microphone for once.
I bet. So thank you. If you've enjoyed this episode of Wisdom for Working Mums, please share it on social media and with your friends and family. I'd love to connect with you too. So if you head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk, you'll find a link on how to do this. And if you love the show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review and subscribe. You'll be helping another working mum find this resource too. Thanks so much for listening.